Take it away, Tiffany
All
Montgomery.
right. So thank you guys for coming, and thank those of you who are watching or listening online for coming to our first public postdoc discussion. I chose to do something for Black History Month. This is not my research area. So my research area is condom use, sexual health, but I am very passionate about issues of diversity. And so kind of in my spare time, if that's a thing, I like to keep up with what's going on, how we can increase diversity, particularly in nursing, and just sort of do those things. So this is actually a presentation that comes from a paper that myself and my colleagues wrote, and that's now under review. We met about a year and a half ago. We're colleagues at work, and just sort of through talking and engaging with one another, realized we all had the same passion for diversity and thought, hey, why don't we write something about it? And so that's sort of where this came from. So today I'm going to present Black Americans in nursing education, past, present, and recommendations for the future. As always, we like to give objectives. So the objective of this presentation is to, number one, look at the past to highlight Black American pioneers in nursing education. We want to look at the present day and review racial disparities affecting Black American nurses or nursing students and faculty, and then look toward the future, thinking about potential strategies for future recruitment and retention of Black nursing faculty and students. I'm talking about Black people today, but this is not just for Black folks. So any group that has people of color, any minority group, whether we're talking about men, because in nursing they happen to be the minority, whether we're talking about another racial group or ethnic group, whether we're talking about age groups, I think that the recommendations that I give today apply for any of those, right? So I just happen to be talking about Black people, Black History Month, so yes. And I don't know if everybody can see, but I have on a shirt that says, Black history is American history, because it totally is. So this isn't just about Black people, it's about America and our culture, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. So I want to start by just addressing some terms. You will not hear me use the term African American, because that term is not inclusive of Black people, right? So if you see the picture on the left, that's Idris Elba. He's Black. He is not African American. He's from the UK, right? He's English. This is Charlize Theron. She's African American. She is not Black. She was born and raised in South Africa, and is technically African American, right? So when I started watching her movies and just began to learn a little bit about her when I was in college, I said, oh my gosh, she's more African American than I'll ever be, right? So I, at that point, stopped self-identifying as African American and began to identify as Black, because African American is a term that has to do with ethnicity and cultural things. Black is a racial term, right? It's about your DNA, what you look like, who you come from, your parents, your ancestors. It doesn't have to do with where you grew up. You could be Asian and adopted into Africa and come over to America at some point, and you are African American. But when we look at literature, that's not usually what we're talking about. We're talking about racial disparities and things that have to do with our biological buildup, our DNA, who our parents are. And so that's why I tend to use the term, or I always use the term Black. All right. So now we'll just jump right into the past. Really quickly, before we jump into things about nursing specifically, I just want us to remember what the history of Blacks in America actually looks like. So Black people were first brought to America as slaves in 1619. So that's just over 400 years ago. We came here, and for 246 years we were slaves. Right? We were freed, quote unquote, in 1865. And for 99 years, there were laws, policies, unspoken procedures that occurred that still kept us in a form of slavery, that did not give us the rights that white Americans had. And so we have to remember that when we're talking about the progression of Black people. It's only been in the last 55 years or so that we have, quote unquote, been equal, right? That we've had the same rights, at least on the law books, that white Americans have had. So we have a very long history of being oppressed in this country, and we're trying to come up from that now, but it's gonna take a while, right? We've only been, again, free, depending on what you know, think that term to me, for the last 55 years. And that's really, really important to remember when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, the timeline and the just the mental toll that it's taken on Black people, as well as on white people and folks of other cultures in this country. A lot of that is, it's not overt knowledge. People don't think about it all the time, but it's there. And so we have to acknowledge and remember that. So most people know Mary Eliza Mahoney to be the first Black professional nurse. If you look up anything on nursing history or the first of anything, you'll usually see her picture. She's often confused for Dr. Crump, a physician, the first Black female physician. This is a nurse. Her name is Mary Eliza Mahoney, and we have to stop confusing her with our physician colleagues. But she was the first Black professional nurse, and she became that nurse in 1879. So again, Black people got here in 1619. We're talking about 250 years later, we get a professional nurse. I'm going to talk a little bit about people who gave contributions to nursing education specifically. So there are a lot of nurses who have first, who are Black, and we are very, very appreciative of their contributions. I'm just going to stick to nursing education today. So Estelle Massey Osborne was the first Black nurse to earn a master's degree in nursing, and that was in 1931. So just think, Mary Eliza Mahoney became a nurse in 1879. We're talking, 50 years or so later, now we have a nurse who has a degree, a graduate degree in nursing. Following her, Dr. Elizabeth Lipford Kent was the first Black nurse to earn a PhD in nursing. So it was about almost 25 years between the first Black nurse to earn a master's degree and the first Black nurse to earn a PhD. In nursing specifically. Then we have Dr. Betty Smith Williams, who is a great mentor with the National Black Nurses Association. She was the first Black nurse to teach in a California Bachelor's of Science in Nursing program, and that was in 1956. Moving on, Dr. Sally Tucker Allen founded the Association of Black Nursing Faculty in 1987. Dr. Randolph, I believe his last name is Ross, is the first Black man to earn a PhD in nursing, and that's in 1988. So we're thinking about, like, I was already born in 88. I was 6 years old in 1988 when the first Black male nurse earned a PhD. From the time that the first Black female nurse earned a PhD, we're talking, 30 plus years. Remembering that nursing is mostly a female profession. There are a lot of women in nursing, but it's important when we talk about diversity. Gender diversity is just important as racial diversity and age diversity. And then Dr. Courtney Leiter, my previous dean, was the first Black male dean of a U.S. School of Nursing. He was the dean of UCLA School of Nursing. He became that dean in 2005. So we're talking from the time the first Black nurse, they weren't called registered nurses back then, but the first Black professional nurse came on the scene in 1879 to 2005 before we would put a Black man at the helm of a nursing school, right? So there's a lot that happened within that time. This is where we've been. We've still got a number of places to go as it relates to Black nurses and nursing education being administrators. You don't see very many Black deans of nursing. You don't see very many Black deans of anything, but we're starting to increase those numbers, which is great. And so this is a little bit of our history. I definitely pay homage to the people who were trailblazers in these areas because of what they did, and especially what they did during the time of Jim Crow laws and lots of segregation. Like, I can't imagine how difficult it must have been to get a master's degree or a PhD in the 1950s. In the 1930s. I can't even imagine. So kudos to them, hats off to them for what they've done for little Black girls like me. So when we talk about people who have contributed to nursing, we also need to talk about institutions who contributed to nursing, particularly nursing education among Blacks. So I'm going to use the term HBCU. A historically Black college or university is one that was established prior to 1964. They have to be. And they were established in order to contribute substantially to the progress of Blacks. okay, in America. They were founded and developed basically so Black people could have a place to be educated. There was a time when we could not go to school, schools that were primarily white, or the numbers of Black people that were allowed in those schools were very, very small. And so we began to establish our own institutions, mostly started by the Black church. Establish our own institutions so that we could be educated. We could receive a proper education and we wouldn't be segregated again in these places. When most people think about HBCUs, they think about the bands. We have awesome bands. They think about the parties and the homecomings and all the fun that people have on HBCU campuses. But there's so much more than that. HBCUs educate 1.5% of all college students in the United States. 14% of bachelor's degrees that are awarded to Black students come from HBCUs. 6% of master's degrees and 12% of doctorate degrees awarded to Black students come from HBCUs. There are currently 101 HBCUs in the United States, and that's down from 121 in the 1930s. So sometimes they lose their status, they close, some schools merge, so the numbers are almost constantly shifting. There are 41 HBCUs right now that have programs with nursing. So some of those are actually community colleges that have ADN programs, some have bachelor's degrees programs, most have bachelor's degrees programs, some have master's, and some have doctoral programs, either the DNP, the Doctorate of Nursing Practice, or the PhD, the research degree in nursing. Less than 10% of all Black U.S. college students attend HBCUs, but HBCUs do a significant contribution for just education among Blacks. So HBCUs educate 12.5% of Black CEOs, 40% of Black congressmen and women and engineers, 50% of Black lawyers, and 50% of Black professors who work at primarily white institutions went to HBCUs. Also, 80% of Black local, state, and federal judges went to HBCUs. So HBCUs are a core institution in the American educational system, and particularly for Black students. We have been educated by far the most with HBCUs, so we have to definitely continue to support them. The first HBCU in the country, Cheyney University, is actually here in Pennsylvania, as is the first HBCU to grant degrees. So they go back and forth on who's first. Cheyney was actually established first, but Lincoln had the first actual graduates to have a bachelor's degree. So Lincoln University has a nursing program. So it's awesome that we have an HBCU in this state and it has a nursing program. So that's pretty cool. So the contribution of HBCUs to nursing education include that of Spelman Seminary, which is now Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. It was the first nursing school for Black students. It no longer has a nursing school, but they established the first one in 1881. Dillard University established its nursing division in 1889, and it is the longest continually operating nursing school for Black students in the country. In 1892, Tuskegee University established an associate degree program, which was the first ADN program at an HBCU. So first ADN program specifically for the education of Black nurses. In 1918, Prairie View A&M in Texas, Tuskegee is in Alabama and Dillard is in New Orleans, Louisiana. Prairie View in Texas established the first nursing school for Black students west of the Mississippi. In 1940, Dillard University again came out on top as a trailblazer, establishing the first BSN program for Black students. Then in 1976, Hampton University established the first master's degree program at an HBCU, and in 1999, just 20 years ago, they established the first PhD program in nursing for Black students at an HBCU. There are currently 2 HBCUs with PhD programs, Hampton and Southern University in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And these programs are less than 20 years old, which says a lot about, you know, how long it took for Black nurses to come into the fold and be educated in the way that our white colleagues were. So we talked a little bit about the past. Now we'll get into the present. So currently, if you look at the disparity between Black nursing students and white nursing students, it's huge. Generic BSN, so these are your traditional bachelor's degree programs, not ones created for people who already have an RN degree who want to go back to get a bachelor's degree, but these are your traditional, you know, high school graduates who go to college wanting to get a bachelor's degree. 68.6, so 69% of those students are white in this country. Only just under 9% of generic bachelor students are Black. And remember, in this country, excuse me, approximately 13% of our population is Black. As far as the BSN programs go, 73% of MSN is 73% of master's degree students in nursing are white, 15% of them are Black. And then we look at 69% of those getting a research doctorate, a PhD, maybe a PhD in education or in nursing. 69% of them are white and 16% of them are Black. One of the things that I want you to notice, which I think is great, is that if you see as the degrees go up, there are more Black people that get those degrees, right? So the ratio of Black nursing students in advanced level degree programs is higher than those in the BSN program, which is great. That means they're continuing their education at a higher rate than our counterparts. As far as nurse faculty are concerned, 81% of nursing faculty today are white. Nursing is very much a white female profession. Only 9% of nursing faculty, full-time nurse faculty, are Black. And then if you look at the disposition of the types of faculty members, the majority of Black faculty members are assistant professors, and that's different than the majority of white faculty members who are actually instructors. So they're not on the tenure track, they're instructors. However, if you look at the gap between the assistant professor and the associate professor, you'll see that white faculty members are more likely to be promoted to associate professor with tenure than are Black faculty members. So Black faculty members come in at associate professor rather than coming in at instructor level, but they're less likely than our white counterparts to be promoted and receive tenure. And so that's really an issue. We have to figure out, and we have some idea why this is happening, but we really have to address it. We have to acknowledge that it's an issue, and we have to address it because we have to stop bringing people into academia and watching them fail and leave. So we talked a little bit about the US. I'm gonna step on a few toes and we're gonna talk about Philly right now. So in Philadelphia, which the city of Philadelphia is upwards of 40% Black, right? The people who live in this city are more than 40% Black. We have only 6% of the nursing faculty in this city are Black. 40% of the residents are Black. So that disparity is like, it's nuts to me. When I got here, I moved here from California. When I got here, I looked around like, whoa, really? This is crazy. You walk around the supermarket, you work in the hospital, you're up and down the street, you see Black people everywhere. When you walk inside of the walls of the academy, we're nowhere to be found, particularly as it relates to nursing. If you look at the total number of Black faculty for each school and then go down to the number of Black male faculty, there's only one school in this city that has a Black male faculty on tenure track, right? This does not include people who teach clinically in the hospital. We're talking about those who teach in theory classes, those who work on the tenure track. 1 out of 308 is a Black man. And then if you look at the number of Black faculty who are tenured, only 2 schools in this city have tenured Black faculty on their staff. One being Drexel. 2 of the Black faculty here at this university are tenured. They're both full professors to my knowledge. And at the University of Pennsylvania, there are 4 Black faculty who are tenured. 1 is a full professor, 3 are associate professors, 2 on the research track and 1 on the clinical track, right? So again, this presents an issue. Yes, Elise?
Is this total nursing faculty or total faculty?
Nursing faculty. This is nursing faculty specifically. So yeah, at the bottom, percent of individual university nursing faculty. So in total, we have less than 0.01% of Black male faculty in this city, and only 2% of the tenured faculty members in the city of Philadelphia, nursing faculty members, are Black, in a city where 40% of the population is Black. That's nuts to me. We really have to do something about that. So I want to talk a little bit about the people who wrote this paper with me, because we did there's a reflection piece in the paper where we talk about ourselves and our own experiences. So there were 4 of us who were on this paper. We're all women. We range in age from 37 to 49 years old. Our mean age is 42. We range in age as far as how long we've been in nursing, from 14 years to 28 years. Mean years in nursing, 18.25. 3 of us, or 75%, attended public, primarily white institutions. 1 of us attended a private HBCU. And 2 of us had experiences with Black faculty members in our bachelor's program. 2 of us did not. So 2 of us went to nursing school, never being taught by a Black person in the nursing program. All right, and the one of the people who did have Black faculty, of course, went to the HBCU, and the other person who had Black faculty, there were 2 Black faculty in her department. I had 2 Black faculty in my department as well, but they taught at the graduate level, so I never took a class with them. I didn't really know anything about them. So when we looked at our reflections, we tried to pull out some themes or similarities between us. For those of us who attended primarily white institutions, we said that we felt isolated. We had to look for support among non-Black faculty because there were no Black faculty that we could turn to, which isn't an issue. Support is support, but there were no people who looked like us that we could turn to. We had between 0 and 2 Black faculty, and then only 5 to 10% of our classmates were Black. As opposed to our HBCU counterpart, she was assigned an upper class mentor when she first got to school. She said she loved walking in the School of Nursing because there was a Hall of Fame in the School of Nursing with pictures of Black nurses on the wall. So she saw Black nurses everywhere. It was all over the place. The majority of her professors were Black. Of course, she was at an HBCU, but still she got to see herself in her professors all the time. And 95% of her graduating class, the nursing class, was Black. And so she was surrounded by Black students and just had a very different experience than those of us who went to primarily white institutions. So what we found, though, was that it was our shared desire to increase diversity and serve as role models that caused us to make the leap from practice to education and research. Even the one colleague that we have who went to the HBCU, she said that it was obvious to her that her experience was not everybody's experience. So even though she was attending an HBCU, she still did clinical in hospitals that had a lot more white nurses and less Black nurses, and she had friends at other institutions that were not having the same experience she was. And so she wanted to be a role model to future Black nursing students, in the same way that those of us who went to primarily white institutions wanted to be a role model to these students as well. There's also, so that was one little anecdotal thing that I picked up. I've also established an early career nurse researcher support group. Currently, there are 9 of us in this group. 6 of us are Black and 4 are non-white Hispanic. 8 of us are nurses, and the other one, I believe she's like public health or maybe sociology. I think it's public health. 2 of us are postdocs. 5 are assistant professors. 1 works in a government agency doing research, and 1 works in full-time practice still. We all have PhDs, I think, except for the 1 person who's non-nursing. She might have an EDD if I'm not mistaken. We've gotten together because we realized we need support. And so we have bi-monthly check-ins. We call and talk on the phone, and we depend on each other for accountability, just with our writing and our scholarship and our productivity. We collaborate together. So some of us have the same research interests, and we talk about collaborations or attending conferences together and presenting together and doing that kind of thing. And then we've also created just a safe space where we can come on the phone, let our hair down, and talk about some of the things that maybe aren't going so well in our programs or at our institutions, things that we can't necessarily, or we don't feel like we have the ability to talk about elsewhere. So this group has so far been really good for us, and I'm looking forward to more great things with this particular group. I asked at our last meeting for us to just talk about some challenges that we're having, right? And these are some of the things that we said. We agreed that we feel isolated a lot of times in our institutions. There are few people of color around, so we don't often interact with people who look like us or who have the same culture experience as us. We've suffered issues of ageism. So because we're early career nurse researchers, the majority of us graduated from our PhD programs at the same time, within a year or two, of between like 2015 and 2017. And some of us have done quite a bit already as far as receiving grants, writing publications, conducting research studies. And when we go to take on leadership positions or do things, we're often told, no, you're too young, right? And so that's an issue for us, and we don't always see that happening with our white counterparts. It seems like they are encouraged to take on leadership positions and do things of that nature, and we're like discouraged, like, no, you need more time in the profession first. Just sit back and watch, and maybe you can do it in another few years, right? There are a lot of old ways of thinking like that in nursing. Like I said before, nursing is primarily a white woman's profession and an older white woman's profession. So the majority of nurses who have a PhD or who work as educators are over 55 years old. That's a huge gap between them and a person like me who's in my mid-30s, or colleagues who are younger than me who are in their 20s and who are coming out with PhDs and, you know, who are on fire and want to do great things, and then they come up against this old guard, old way of thinking, and get really discouraged. Sometimes we suffer issues of discrimination. Some of them are very overt, most of them are covert, so we deal with microaggressions, macroaggressions. There's little encouragement we see for minority RN to PhD programs, so there's a pipeline where we try to get students into PhD programs straight out of the RN programs. And we see that being pushed mostly among our white counterparts, not necessarily minority nursing students. We found that it's been difficult to develop community sometimes, and there are times when we feel like we can't trust the environment or the people that are around. So we need to create these safe spaces where we can be ourselves, where we can feel trusted, where we can let our hair down. So why increase diversity? I mean, I feel like I shouldn't have to ask that question, but I ask it anyway. And so the incorporation of diversity, particularly into nursing curricula, right? Not waiting until the nursing students have graduated in our license, but incorporating diversity training into curricula is a necessary aspect of nursing education. So just like access to culturally diverse healthcare providers can lead to reductions in healthcare disparities, we found that access to culturally diverse nursing faculty can help reduce disparities in nursing education, including low recruitment and retention of diverse nurses, and facilitate minority student success. So that's why we want to increase diversity. Also, minority nursing faculty can leverage our unique lived experiences to help foster inclusion and diversity among nursing students. So this increased awareness among future nursing professionals, can provide patients with improved quality of care and just overall health, right? So it's important that cultural competency, issues around diversity, these types of talks start in the classroom as soon as the nursing students hit the door. We know that a lack of diversity is experienced often as isolation among those in the minority population, alienation, bless you, and discrimination. And so we want to get ahead of those things. There's been research that's shown student barriers to success. These are minority students, particularly Black students. Their barriers to success include things like lack of financial support, inadequate emotional or moral support, insufficient peripheral support, so insufficient access to academic advising, access or utilization of academic advising program, mentoring, technical support, and also professional socialization. So rigorous curriculum as well. Family obligations, that's a big one. That's a huge one. For people of color, just because you go away to college, you are not now disconnected from your responsibilities with your family. I was in a PhD program and still paying for my mother's living expenses. You know, that was very difficult. Could I have those conversations with my white professors? Not always, because they didn't understand. And when I tried to have those conversations, their responses were very unkind. And so I just stopped having them, right? So a lot of times you see students, particularly when you get to advanced levels, who still have family obligations. They're taking care of children, they're taking care of elderly or aging parents, they're financially contributing to siblings, households, or what have you. tend to have very communal values, and so that doesn't stop just because now I'm in school, right? And then we know that minority students tend to have poorer skills than our white counterparts, like study habits, testing skills, and time management skills. And this just comes from the type of schools that they go to in undergrad, in high school, right? They come out of high school ill-prepared a lot of times to go right into college prep type work. And we recognize that, so we need to now do something about it. Also, faculty barriers to success as it relates to Black nursing faculty, negative thoughts of physical appearance and speech. That's a huge one. I'll just tell you a short story. When I was on the market before for a job, I interviewed at a particular institution, and after weeks of like having all these thoughts about, oh my gosh, what should I do with my hair? I don't want to come off as like this Black militant person, so I don't want to wear braids necessarily. I love my curly hair, but people seem to, I don't know, like it better when it's straight. I hate straightening my hair, but maybe I should straighten my hair. Having all these thoughts, I had this interview, and as I was coming out of the interview, I said to one of the faculty members, yeah, you know, I really want to be at a place that has a good work-life balance. I don't want to be pulling my hair out. And she said, yeah, because I know how much you guys pay for hair. And I just, like, I couldn't even speak. I said, oh, okay. So I went in my car, and I probably sat in my car for about 30 minutes before I even turned on the ignition, because I just had to release the stress that I was feeling from that phrase. Check that school off my list. We'll never work there. But this kind of thing happens. These microaggressions, they build up, and they cause people to be stressed out and leave academia, quit their jobs because they don't want to deal with it. Also, lack of proper resources is a big one. Toxic work environments. I previously left the job because of toxic work environments, noticing that I was being treated very differently than my white counterparts. Although the data showed that my students were excelling in class, I was being asked to change things about myself and my person because the students somehow perceive me as being something that I'm totally not. I'm very passionate when I talk, but passion doesn't equate to anger, right? So I'm not an angry Black woman. I'm very passionate, especially when I'm talking about issues of maternal mortality and morbidity, especially when I'm talking about racial disparities and sexual health. Yes, I'm passionate. I'm not scary. I'm not the boogeyman. You know, so these types of issues we need to address. We need to acknowledge them and address them. Also, disrespect from students. I've personally had several instances where I've had to tell students, my name is Dr. Montgomery. Please stop calling me Tiffany. I will not answer to that. My name is Dr. Montgomery. People writing emails that say, hey, Tiff, no, ma'am, I am not your colleague. I am not your friend. And you do not address my white counterparts that way. So why do you feel comfortable doing it to me? These are the types of issues that we deal with from students, also from faculty and administration. And again, it's just identifying, acknowledging these things so that we can address them. So I'm going to give a few recommendations for the future now. So a couple recommendations for tips for recruiting and retaining both Black faculty members and students. One is to make sure that your university has a strong, clear, and genuine commitment to diversity, right? It's not the creation of the DEI committee, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that has a talk every couple of months, but doesn't sit down and look at policies to make sure that they're not inadvertently keeping minority students from being able to apply to programs, or looking at policies that keep certain minority faculty off of admissions committees or things like that, right? We want diversity and inclusion to be more than just a name. We want to actually practice what we're preaching. We want to have supportive and culturally sensitive faculty. It's important that faculty understand the students that they're teaching, understand their backgrounds and the values and things that are very important to them, the things that they might be dealing with at home, the barriers that they might be facing that make them appear to be less successful than their white counterparts, and have knowledge of resources that they can provide for these students. I was just talking to a nursing faculty member not long ago about, she said she wanted to change up some of her testing items because she realized people who spoke English as a second language didn't understand some of the terms that we throw around all the time, right? And so they were getting lower marks on their exams simply because they didn't understand the lingo, right? So using terminology that's well understood by everyone and not using, I don't know, just terms that we use out at home or on the streets or things like that, particularly for those who don't speak English as a first language. Increasing the number of minority faculty members, right? When you have people that are teaching you who look like you, it makes you believe, hey, I can probably do that too. I had no Black faculty members in nursing school, and that's actually what drove me to become an educator. I thought it was ridiculous that I was at the school that often was awarded for being the most diverse campus in the nation, like for years and years and years. And I'm sitting in a class of 150 students where 6 of us are Black and we don't have any Black faculty members. That's not diversity to me. And so I thought, no, I'm gonna become an educator because I want people who look like me to know that they can do it too. And then lastly, mentoring. So mentoring looks like a lot of different things. It looks like the peer mentoring group that I talked about establishing. Sometimes you just get with your buddies and say, hey, you guys, we need help. I reached out to my friends, and that's how the group started. I said, look, I'm struggling to write papers. Like, I need help. I need accountability. I need some support. Can you guys support me? They said, absolutely. When are we going to be on the call? You know, so we started calling and started emailing, and it's turned into this beautiful thing. And I think that type of mentoring, peer mentoring, as well as traditional mentoring from people who are ahead of you in academia can be very helpful to both students and early career faculty members. Remember, we want to get Black faculty from the assistant level to the associate level. We don't want them coming in as assistant professors and leaving. So what does this look like? It looks kind of like this. Yesterday and the day before, I was with Dr. Jamat, who's my faculty mentor, and a couple of other nurses came from around the country. One of them works in practice, one is an assistant professor, one is an associate professor, and there was me as the postdoc, and we just got together for 2 days of career planning and just being built up by Dr. Jamat, just hearing, you know, you're smart, you can do this, don't let that rejection take you down, it's okay, let's resubmit, getting together to outline papers together and talk about how we can present. We sat down and corrected an abstract that I'm gonna submit this weekend. Like, we just got together and worked for 2 solid days. And that's sort of what this type of mentoring looks like. No, people might not be able to fly from across the country all the time, but find folks locally that you can take on and mentor. And it doesn't just have to be Black faculty members who do it. In fact, it shouldn't be. There's something called the Black tax. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of it, but in blue collar society, it's this idea of working twice as hard to get half as much, right? In the white collar society, and particularly in academia, it's this thought that Black people are somehow tasked with doing all the diversity stuff, with mentoring all the Black students. And that's crazy. Number one, because there are so few Black faculty in the first place. But number two, they're not responsible for the mentorship of every diverse student in the school. Neither are they responsible for teaching our white colleagues not to be so fragile or not to use microaggressions. We have to have white allies who will come alongside us to do this work because it is taxing to have to do it all on your own, right? And then we wonder why Black faculty members don't get tenure at the rate that white faculty members do. Well, they're doing their scholarship, they're doing their teaching, and they're also mentoring 20 students who are crying in their offices, right? We cannot expect them to do that, and we should not expect them to do it. It's not their job. It's all of our jobs. And so we have to get out of this idea that just because you're Black, you go on every equity committee, or just because you're Black, you take on all the Black students. It cannot continue to work that way. Another thing that we can do, I believe, to get Black faculty members on board is pay attention to the wage gap, right? So at this point, Black women make 66 cents on the dollar compared to white men, right? White women are making 19 cents more an hour than Black women are. So there's a disparity just in wages. And if you remember what we talked about before, we have to realize that particularly in nursing, the earning potential for nurses who practice in a hospital or other community setting is much higher than nurses who are educators, unless you're getting, $1 million NIH grants, and that's not the majority of us. Your earning potential is actually higher at the bedside or in the community practicing as an advanced practice nurse, or even in RN. I made much more money working as an RN than I do as a postdoc or any research position that I've ever been offered. And so most of us are here because we love the work. We want to do the work. It's not beneficial to our pockets, though, to come into these positions. And so when you want to recruit people, you have to, number one, remember that, but also remember there's a disparity just in the demographics. So the majority of white, of nursing faculty members are white, married, middle class, older women, right? When you're thinking about bringing in Black faculty, you have to remember statistics like the fact that 83% of white women between 25 and 55 are married or have ever been married, while only 56% of Black women that same age group have. So you're talking about more women who are not married, who do not come from two-income households, right? So who might not be able to afford to leave their jobs in practice to come and teach. A lot of my white colleagues that I've just met over the years are teaching not because they need the income. They're married to physicians or businessmen, or their families are well taken care of, right? They're not teaching because they need to pay their bills. Where on the other hand, the Black faculty members oftentimes are. And so I'm not saying that we should give Black people money because they're Black. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying we have to acknowledge these issues and these disparities in wages and salary earning potential, and just sort of pay attention to that. Also, if Black women are making less money and Black women are the people raising Black children, then you have children who need scholarships to go to school. You have children who can't afford for their parents to pay out of pocket. Most Black college students are still first-generation college students. That's something we have to keep in mind. So scholarships for people of color help to bring people of color into the pipeline. If we can get Black nursing students, we can get Black nursing faculty. So my job here was not to say that, like I said, all Black faculty members should just be given bonuses and raises because they're Black. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have to look at the difference between equality, equity, and liberation of the barriers that keep us from being equitable. So we have to get out of the mind frame of thinking if we give everybody the same cookie, everybody's gonna be okay. Remember the picture that we first started off with the history of Blacks in America. Black people are trying to play catch up for more than 250 years of being behind, right? So when you hear white people say things like, well, nobody gave me a handout, I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps. Well, the policies were made for you to succeed, right? You have the ability, or your parents, your grandparents have the ability to purchase homes where a lot of Black people did not, or were not able to purchase homes in specific areas. If you go down to West Philly right now, Black folks are being pushed out of their neighborhoods so that other folks can come in, gentrify these areas and live well. Right? We have to consider those types of things when we're thinking about diversity and sort of leveling the playing field. There's a lot more that's at play than just what we as individuals are doing in our day-to-day interactions with each other. We have to think about the policies. We have to think about the unspoken or unwritten procedures that are often handed out, right? We have to think about just the fact that Black faculty members might be dealing with the stress of watching the news last night and somebody was killed by the police, or having children that they're, afraid that those types of things can happen to them. People bring all this stuff into work with them. They're dealing with this stuff. So we have to find ways to sort of take those barriers away, level the playing field, not by giving out equal portions of a cookie, but giving out what people need to be successful, right? So that's what the middle picture is, equity. Equity is not about equal portions. It's about meeting people where they are and giving them what they need so we're all at the same place. But even better than that, liberating us from the barriers that are holding us back is the best thing we can do. Get those barriers out of here, and you don't have to give me anything, right? I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that it's going to happen overnight, but I'm saying we need to acknowledge that it needs to happen and start making plans to get there. So I thank you for listening to my presentation, and I am definitely open for questions.
Do you want to invite the people
Yes.
online? If folks who are online, if you want to turn your microphone on to ask a question, please do so, or you can put it in the chat, and we'll share it with Dr. Montgomery.
And I would gladly give my references. I hate putting references at the end of a presentation because they're so small, nobody can read them anyway. So if you need references, just email me and I'll send them to you. I have no problem with that.
First response is excellent. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I do have a question.
Yep.
So, I was just wondering if you could help me out with understanding a way in to be supportive in this idea of mentorship as a white woman to help and support mentorship with people of color or people who are coming from different backgrounds than my own. To what is the entry point for me to be useful in that? Because I hear that people of color and Black people can't be expected to carry all of the burden. As a white woman, I'm also very aware of my privilege, and I am always trying to navigate what the way in a respectful way is in that situation. So if you could just speak to that a little bit.
I think that it really starts off with just authenticity and just getting to know people, right? Not looking at students like a pet project, or looking at them like you know, I know you probably need help, so I want to mentor you, so I'm going to identify you and highlight you. Not that, but just very authentic, genuine conversations, allowing them to get to know you. When I was a faculty member, I had plenty of white mentees. I'm writing papers with 2 of them right now. And so it wasn't about Black or white. For me, I acknowledged that the Black students needed role models who looked like them and probably were going to cling to me a little bit more than the white students. But I was open for everybody. My door was always open. I was constantly having conversations with students just about, hey, how was your weekend? Or, you know, what are you doing tonight after the game? Or just acknowledging them as people, and building genuine relationships. I think that that's where it starts.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'd like to comment.
Sure.
Your passion is,
Yeah.
so I see you in a real leadership role as you move forward too. I think you just, the way you presented, was just great. I'd just like to also comment what you called your support group. Sometimes I've heard words like, well, with respect to practice, communities of practice, but I think that's it's a great thing. Some of our degree programs here where they've been online, you know, graduate programs, and people maybe, so this is more related to practice than, you know, your racial or ethnic background, but they just found a great support. So I think about when you mentioned assistant professors and things, how it may be so important, right, for these sort of support or however groups where you could sort of link up with people and have an opportunity which may not always be present. So I think that's just with technology and stuff, that's just a great idea. The other, and I can get more information there, you may help me. We have a provost, in our provost's office in our university. I'm going to say her name wrong probably. It's Corinne Boudreau. How did you know?
Corinne Boudreau.
Corinne Boudreau. And do you know the name of the organization? We've been talking with her. She's a proponent from another place. I think she was down, I can't remember when, but there's an organization. It's sort of representing the South, but we're participating, Drexel, and it's designed for PhD students from underrepresented or minority, and it's designed to provide some of that support. They have an annual conference, which, as well as a local mentoring with just sort of a lot of things you touched on, in preparing the leaders, the educators, the researchers. Do you know? I'll send it to you. Just if I don't know if you were aware of it.
Well, I know I've been trying to get to, I've talked to you about this, Aaron, the faculty, I'm going to say it wrong, Faculty Women of Color in the Academy. They're a really nice organization, so I've heard, and they're having a conference in Virginia. But that's one of the things. So you think about people of color who might not have the resources to get places and need, like, I can't afford to fly down here and do that. But, you know, if we had scholarships or travel funds or something outside of just, this is what you do for your scholarship and your academic, you know, needs, but also what about your emotional needs? What about your social needs? What about the support that you need? Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I think somebody put up the comment, the SREB, it's Southern Regional Education Board is what you were
That's
speaking
it.
about.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know if you've ever heard. I'll send you just so if you're aware.
that would be
Okay.
great. I didn't know
And
that we were doing anything with
the
it.
very point is, and where we're having trouble, because Corinne is trying to get colleges to be able to have the monies to support, so that if you're a participant as a PhD student, there wouldn't necessarily be cost out of your pocket.
Right.
You would, so that is where she's
That would be
created
great.
our awareness, and we need to work towards having some funds
Yeah,
that could do that.
it's necessary. I think if schools begin to value emotional health as much as they value scholarship, then